testing. All right, we're going to be starting soon. I'm just checking my audio, making sure you guys can hear the buzzers when they go off. It should be about now. Yep. All right, great. So I don't see anybody in chat. Now that doesn't mean that nobody is listening to this. You could be listening to this through an embedded player or something else. However, if I don't see anybody in chat, that means nobody in chat is going to be answering any questions, which is fine. I'm still going to read the questions, answers, and take my own guess. I am watching chat, so if you do come into chat and you are going to be answering, I will start giving you 30 seconds to answer each question if you need it, as you need it. So we'll just kind of go by ear. So let's go ahead and get question started. We are doing general principles of agency, agency and non-agency relationships as it um, pertains to real estate licensees. There's only a couple questions in this one. So these are just practice questions that come with um, my course, my online course. I've already passed the course, so I'm just doing some more studying and practicing before I go take the state exam. These are all national questions, so these should apply to anyone in any state. So whether or not you are studying to become a licensee or just interested in getting into real estate, these are just some sample questions, and feel free to answer. You do not have to be an um, active student to answer. This is just for fun and my way of studying. So question one. Stacy, a buyer, is working with Rebecca, a licensee, or a real estate agent, if you will. Rebecca doesn't represent Stacy, however. Which of these statements about this situation is correct? So Stacy's the buyer and Rebecca is the licensee, but Rebecca does not represent Stacy. Which of these statements about the situation is correct? Stacy is Rebecca's client. Stacy is Rebecca's customer. Rebecca is acting in an agency capacity for Stacy. Rebecca can't work with Stacy without an agency agreement. Because I don't have anybody in chat, I'm going to say Stacy is Rebecca's customer. Now with these practice questions, it'll immediately tell us if we're right or wrong. Because there's no agency agreement, express or implied in place, Stacy is Rebecca's customer. If Rebecca begins to perform tasks for Stacy that create an implied agency agreement, or if Rebecca and Stacy decide to sign an agency agreement, Stacy then becomes Rebecca's client. All right, question two. Which of these is an example of a non-agency relationship? Non-agency relationship. A. Kendra represents Stephen in the sale of his home. She helps him complete the necessary paperwork to make his offer. B. Dutton was previously a licensee. He's selling his home, and he wants Wanda to just assist him with the paperwork. C. Alexa, a licensee, works closely with her buyer client's lender to be sure the lender has all information needed to approve the loan. D. Ingrid, a licensee, helps her neighbor Jeremy spruce up his house before Jeremy's agent holds an open house. Again, because I don't have anybody in chat, I'll go ahead and answer that. I think it's D. And, oh, man, I got it wrong. Let's see. Non-agency is a form of relationship between a customer and a licensee. So let's go back here. And I should have looked at this. Okay, was previously a licensee. He's selling his own home, and he wants Pond to assist him. Let's see if that's the right answer. There you go. In a non-agency relationship, the agent can perform only limited tasks. The consumer is a customer and isn't represented by the agent, so the agent is generally prohibited from performing any tasks of a fiduciary nature, including advising, interpreting, or analyzing the agent. The agent can perform ministerial and clerical tasks. So let's go back. Oops. Shoot. Hopefully, yeah, okay. Let's go back to the wrong answer when I read this. Non-agency is a form of relationship between a customer, and a licensee. Non-agency isn't an agency relationship because there's no agency agreement between the two parties. So since options A and C both describe licensees assisting their actual clients, they're out too. Ingrid isn't representing Jeremy, but helping him spruce up his home isn't a task a licensee would perform as an agent, so option D is out. This leaves us with option B. Dutton isn't licensed, and Wanda, a licensee, is assisting him with just him just is assisting him just with the forms he needs for the sale. As a non-agent for this buyer, Wanda can assist the customer by presenting offers or counteroffers and providing other clerical and ministerial tasks. But she isn't bound to, and shouldn't, perform any fiduciary duties for Dutton. He's Wanda's customer. Wanda shouldn't provide any advice, interpret any documents or concepts, or provide any transaction related analysis. All right, let's go to the next one. We're going to go on to um, general principles of agency, agents' duties to clients. Let's see how many questions we have in this section. 3. Question 1. Tristan refuses to let Marla list his property on the MLS, even though Marla knows that more exposure of the property will generate more potential buyers. Which two fiduciary duties are at odds in this situation? So Tristan doesn't want to list his property on the MLS, even though Marla knows that exposure to the property will generate more potential buyers. Which fiduciary duties are at odds in this situation? Loyalty and obedience, reasonable skill and care and confidentiality, loyalty and confidentiality, obedience and reasonable skill and care. Because we don't have anybody in the chat, I'll go ahead and answer. I believe it to be D. Yes. In this scenario, Marla's fiduciary duties of reasonable skill and care and obedience are at odds. She knows that listing the property on the MLS will provide the greatest exposure to her client's property, but she's bound by her duty of obedience. Jessie, the buyer's agent, decides to informally inspect the property while she waits for the professional inspection. She notices a small puddle of water in the basement behind a stack of boxes. Later, Jessie calls the seller's agent and tells him what she found. The agent tells her not to worry. The seller is aware of the leak and plans to have it fixed within the week. Which of these statements about the situation is true? Since the seller intends to fix the leak, Jessie doesn't need to disclose it to her buyer. Jessie can rely on the inspector to discover and disclose the leak. Jessie can check the basement later to be sure the leak is fixed, or Jessie should disclose this to her buyers. And I think this is obvious. We have to disclose these things. It's quite likely that the inspection report to the buyer will include information about this leak. However, Jessie shouldn't depend on that and should tell her buyer what she found. Together, Jessie and the buyer can check the inspection report to see if this issue appears there and can address it with the seller if the inspector happens to miss it. Principal broker Todd is often extremely busy supervising his brokerage and training new licensees. He doesn't have time for his own clients, so he frequently sends his wife Cindy to meet his clients to sign transactional paperwork. Cindy doesn't hold a real estate license, but she does have a power of attorney for Todd. All fees are paid to Todd. What is the issue with Todd doing this? A, there is no issue as long as Cindy has a POA for Todd. B, there is no issue as long as the fees are paid directly to Todd. C, Cindy should be paid any fees due. Or D, Todd is prohibited from allowing anyone to use his principal broker's license in order to perform real estate activities. Well, when in doubt, always go for the longer answer. Let's try that one. Yes, in general, principal brokers can't let anyone use their license in order to perform real estate activities, even if the principal broker receives the fee. All right. Now we're going to go to continue to general principles of agency, creation of agency and non-agency agreements. Let's see how many questions we have in here. 4. Question 1. Joan is representing the buyer, Carlton, and Reggie is representing the sellers, Zeb and Teresa. Carlton's great aunt Matilda has agreed to pay any portion of Joan's commission the sellers don't cover. Teresa Martin's father, Teddy, has agreed to pay half of the sales commission that will be owed to the listing agent. Which of these statements is true? A. Since she's paying Carlton's share of the commission, Matilda is Joan's client. B. Reggie's clients are Zeb, Teresa, and Teddy. C. Compensation determines agency, so Matilda and Teddy are the agent's principals in this transaction. Or D. Signed agency agreements are the best method of determining agency. Carlton and the Martins are the agent's principals in this transaction. Okay, I need to read this question again for myself. Joan is representing the buyer, Carlton, and Reggie is representing the sellers, Zeb and Teresa Martin. Carlton's great aunt Matilda has agreed to pay any portion of Joan's commission the sellers don't cover. Teresa Martin's father, Teddy, has agreed to pay half of the sales commission that would be owed to the listing agent. Okay, since she's paying Carlton's share of the commission, Matilda is Joan's client. No. Reggie's clients are Zeb, Teresa, and Teddy. No. Compensation determines agency. No. Signed agency agreements are the best method of determining agency. Carlton and the Martins are the agent's principals in this transaction. Yes, agency is determined by agreement only. No matter who's paying the firm's commission, the agency agreement is between the parties who either signed a written agreement or are functioning under a verbal express agreement or an implied agency agreement. All right, question 2. So basically, whoever pays the commission for the client, that's between the client and that person. All right, Bert terminated his exclusive right to sell listing agreement with Scott, his listing broker, without cause. His exclusive right to sell listing agreement with Scott, his listing broker, without cause. Bert may legally do this as long as he's A. unhappy with Scott's services, B. willing to find his own buyer, C. a real estate licensee, or D. willing to pay Scott's commission anyway. There you go. That's right. Exclusive right to sell listing agreements represent the highest level of representation to the seller, but they also represent the listing agent's right to a commission regardless of who finds a buyer. Bert may still owe Scott commission in an exclusive right to sell situation. Claudius has some trust issues. He's been to 3 different brokerages already and still refuses to sign an agency agreement. He says he wants to keep his options open. What should you tell him? A. I can represent you without a written agreement. B. You won't be able to enter into a contract without buyer representation. C. If you sign today, I'll waive the admin fee. Or D. Signing the form is legally required. Well, I can't represent you without a written agreement. That would be the appropriate answer. That's correct. You can't represent someone without a signed agency agreement. You can assist a non-client with administrative type tasks, but you can't advocate for that person in a fiduciary capacity in any way. All right, question 4. Which of these circumstances does not require agent disclosure? A. As part of his corporation, Sean, a licensee, owns several investment properties. He's selling one. B. Marty is representing Dwayne in both the sale of Dwayne's current home and the purchase of his new home. C. Megan has listed her brother's townhome for sale. D. Gary represents the buyer. He's a shareholder in the title insurance company the buyer has selected. All right, so we know it's not A or D. Megan has listed her brother's townhome for sale, or Marty is representing Dwayne in both the sale of Dwayne's current home and the purchase of his new home. Ooh, that's a tough one. Would Megan need to disclose that she's selling her brother's townhome? It's her brother's town. Well, she does have. Yeah, she does. She does. Okay, we're gonna say Marty's representing Dwayne in both the sale of his current home and the purchase of his new home. Yes. Licensees are required to disclose any conflict of interest, which of course Megan would have selling her brother's townhome, including a personal or professional relationship with a buyer or a seller client. There's no conflict of interest when an agent represents a client in the sale of his home and that same client in the purchase of another home. All right. So that's your answer. All right. Continue to general principles of agency, agent, third party, and customer responsibilities rather. All right. We've got two questions here. At the end, there'll be a little 10-question quiz we'll take. All right. Question one. You represent Ember as her listing agent. Ashley's the buyer, and Trinity represents her. What duties do you owe Trinity? So, as one agent, what duties do you represent the other agent? A. Loyalty. B. Confidentiality. C. The same duties you owe Ember. Or D. Honesty and fairness. I could see how some people might pick B. Confidentiality because that's always something you want to give to anybody, but I believe the answer to be honesty and fairness. While agents don't owe fiduciary duties to customers or third parties, they owe all parties to the transaction the duties of honesty, fairness, integrity, disclosure, and accounting. Agents are required to disclose material facts to both clients and customers and must properly account for all parties' property, documents, and funds. Agents must also cooperate to permit showings, etc. All right, question two. In a real estate transaction in which you represent the seller, your duty to other parties is to A. Maintain the confidentiality of all matters that other parties disclose to you. B. Be honest in all matters that do not affect your client's interests. C. Treat them honestly and fairly. Or D. Be polite and courteous. All right. In a real estate transaction in which you represent the seller, your duties to other parties is to. This is kind of like the same answer. Treat them honestly and fairly, I believe, is going to be the answer. Let's see. Yes, a licensee. Yeah, treat them honestly and fairly is like almost always the answer to anything that doesn't represent your immediate client or your principal. A licensee's duties to customers and other third parties in a transaction are to be honest and fair, act with integrity, disclose material facts, and account for property, funds, or documents. All right. General principles of agency, termination of agency. How can we terminate an agency agreement? Client or licensee? We've got 5 questions here. Question one. Tabitha listed her small town property for sale. The community is in a decline. The largest local employer just shut its doors. The house has been on the market for several months with no offers. Tabitha decides to rent the property out instead of selling it. Under which of these circumstances can she do so without penalty? She's listed her. Okay. Okay, house has been on several market for several months. She decides to rent the property out instead of selling it. So presumably she has a contract with an agent. Okay. She received no offerings on the listing, so she can terminate her listing agreement. B, the local economy doesn't support sale of the property, so she's permitted to move the listing agreement to a firm in a larger city. C, the listing agreement with her current broker has expired. Or D, since she's converting it to a rental, she can terminate the listing. The answer is C, the listing agreement has expired. If If she terminates the listing agreement before its natural expiration without good cause, she may owe the real estate agent some money. Listing agreements must include an expiration date. Often State law often state that agreements with no expiration will expire in a specific time period or period of time. The only reason presented here that would allow the seller to terminate the listing without potential penalty is if the listing agreement has expired. All right. Which of these statements best describes a listing that terminates by performance? A. Greg lists the property that fails to sell during the term of the listing agreement. However, he's performed all the tasks promised to the seller. B. Marty lists Todd's condo. With Marty's efforts, they get to closing only to have the buyer's financing fall through. C. Roberto lists the property for Terrence. After 2 failed offers, the property makes it to a successful closing. C. Evan performs all required fiduciary duties and tasks in the listing of Vaughn's house, even though it didn't sell before the listing expired. So terminates by performance. Ooh, this is a tough one for me. Terminates by performance. Oh, I think I'm going to get this one wrong. It's either B or D, I feel like. Greg lists a property that fails to sell during the terms of the listing agreement. However, he's performed all. Could be A. Look at this one, Paul. This, look at this Q&A and tell me which one you think it is. Mm-hmm. I think it's I. Yeah, not completes itself, but terminates. I think it's D. 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 Let's see.
That's what I would say.
Ooh, we're wrong. While a property going under contract is a major milestone for the buyer, the seller, and the agents involved, the agent's agreement only ends by performance at closing. There it is. It's going to be C. 2 failed attempts, the property made it a successful closing. Yeah, I bet you that's it. Yep. The only transaction that actually closed. See, this says terminates. Well, terminates, I guess, closed by performance. Okay.
Yeah, I was.
It's a little tricky.
Verbiage.
The word it's
Terminate seems like it.
if it said the listing that closed by performance, then that would have
I would
been
have said that one.
yeah. The only transaction that actually closed, aka reached performance. Okay, is Roberto's closing represents the completion of a performance of an agency agreement. Okay, performance rather than partial. It would have been partial performance if it didn't close. Okay.
Can I
Well,
ask you a question?
yeah. All right. Question 3. Rex has a reputation in the community for being a bit odd. He lists his ranch for sale at a price vastly lower than what his agent recommended. But Rex insists. Rex's distant family hears of the potential sale, files a motion in court claiming that Rex isn't legally competent. Rex's distant family hears of the potential sale, files a motion in court claiming that Rex isn't legally competent, and wins. What's the status of the listing agreement? It isn't valid. Rex's family must abide by it. Oh, it's still valid, right? No. The listing is temporarily on hold. No. Rex's agent can't continue to market the property. No. The listing agreement is terminated by force of law. All right, that's the answer. We're going to do these last two, then we're going to go ahead and end. I haven't had anybody join. Question 4. Jensen signed a seller's agency agreement with Susan. A few weeks after that, right before closing, a hurricane destroyed the property. What happens to Jensen and Susan's agreement? Force of law again. Hurricane. Under which of these statements are the client and agent most likely to mutually agree on to terminate a listing? The client has found a buyer and wants to avoid paying a commission. The client's cousin just became licensed and needs her first listing. The agent and client don't agree on the best way to price, maintain, and market the property, or a buyer approached the seller with a much higher offer. Agent and client can't agree. All right, let's go ahead and do quickly the exam, and then I'm going to finish this unit. I got 100% last time, so cross our fingers. Got 10 questions. What fiduciary duty means putting the client's interest ahead of the agent's interest? Loyalty. Ned is a listing agent who has learned of a material fact related to the transaction. To whom and when must he disclose this information? To all parties as soon as possible. Assuming that dual agency is legal where these scenarios occur and that the licensee's brokerages permit it, which of these situations demonstrates illegal dual agency? Jared represents the seller, Juan. A buyer, Alina, approaches Jared about representing her in the purchase of Juan's house. Jared obtains Juan and Alina's consent. Katie's firm uses representation agreements that, when signed, provide consent to dual license, dual agency. Katie's buyer makes an offer on one of Katie's colleagues' listing. C. Levi's customer, Renee, wants to make an offer on Levi's seller client's home. Levi explains he represents the seller, but then presents Renee's offer to his client. Tom is holding an open house for his client, Ruby. A buyer says she wants to make an offer. She details her situation. Tom waits until she finishes and then suggests that she offer a non-refundable earnest money deposit to strengthen her offer. I think it's going to be B or C. Cody's firm uses representation agreements that, when signed, provide consent to dual license, dual agency. Levi's customer, Renee, wants to make an offer on Levi's seller's client's home. Levi explains that he represents the seller, but then presents Renee's offer to his client. I think you gotta get written express agreement on that. A seller decides to terminate her listing agreement and rent the property out instead of selling it after it's been under market. Okay, assuming that her listing agent has fulfilled all of his responsibilities, can the seller terminate the contract before it's expired? Only if the seller and the listing agent mutually agree to terminate the contract. Only if the seller succeeds in converting it to a rental. Yes, because the seller has not received any offerings. Yes, because the seller is entitled to terminate. Only if the seller and listing agent mutually agree to terminate the agreement. Phoebe is careful to never act outside of her scope of expertise. She's a real estate professional and proud of it. So when asked to for advice about legal matters, inspection results, flaws in construction, or shoddy building material, she always refers them to a professional in that field. Which duty is Phoebe demonstrating? It is the duty of reasonable skill and care. Marcy listed her property with Jennings' home in March. The market was slow and Marcy's property isn't in great condition, though she's sure she can get top dollar for it because of its location. Her agent encouraged her to either reduce the price or fix the property up, but she refused. Both Marcy and her agent are frustrated. What's the best option for both of them? Bring in another agent? Let the listing expire? One party or the other should terminate, or they can mutually agree to terminate the listing. That's my answer. 7. Which of the following questions can an agent in a dual agency transaction answer without breaching their fiduciary duties to either client? Are you aware of any structural issues with the property? You can't answer how much should I counter offer, what repairs or concessions should I ask for, and what should I agree to fix in a dual situation. All right. Christy found a property that was for sale by owner and made an offer. The seller accepted Christie's offer, but neither of them knew how to proceed. Licensee Zelda helped Christie complete the necessary purchase documents and walked her through the process. What kind of agency exists? It's not confirmed, it's not expressed, it's either implied or verbal, and I'm going to go with implied. Which of the following duties are owed to customers and other parties to a real estate transaction? Honesty and fairness, that's always the answer. Last question. Do you represent a seller as a listing agent? Do you owe any duties to buyer agents? No, you owe no duties, only if the agent works in your office. Yes, the duty to cooperate on showings. Yes, the same duties you owe to the seller. You represent a seller as a listing agent. Do you owe any duties to buyer agents? No, only if the agent works for your office. Yes, the duty to cooperate on showings. Let's see how we did. 90% got one wrong. Sugar. Let's see which one we got wrong. Hmm. He represents this. Okay, so I guess that is the disclosure. Not only did Tom allow the potential buyer to give him all of her details, he then gave her advice about her offer. This example of illegal dual agency is likely to get Tom into big trouble. Yeah, probably is that one. Okay, well, my score went down. Oh well. Well, if you are listening and not in chat, thank you for listening. If you are listening and not in chat, you're probably just watching through an embedded player. However, because I didn't get any participation, I'm just going to go ahead and end it here. And I thank you for listening.